The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 1, The Fall. Chapter 8. Tal sat down at the game table, and Ethar sat opposite. Tal felt strangely calm now that he had accepted the challenge. He looked down at the 7 rectangular depressions in the tabletop in front of him. He knew what they were, but he thought he'd pretend to know less about the game. That way Ethar might underestimate him. "What order are these in again?" he asked, pointing to the rectangles. "Head, heart, temper, skin, speed, strength, and special," said Ethar quickly. Each rectangle would ultimately hold 1 card, and that card would specify the characteristics of the beast. The strength card would determine the beast's strength, the speed card would determine its quickness, and so on. When all the cards were in place and finalized, 2 5-inch-high beasts of solid light would be produced from the combined characteristics to battle it out in the marble circle in the middle of the table. Whoever played their cards right and produced the victorious beast would win the game. Each card could be changed twice by using light, so even when a card was in place and your opponent could see it, it might still change. The trick of the game was to make the other player think you were making a certain sort of beast, and then change it at the last moment by altering the cards that governed its 7 characteristics. There was also luck, of course. There were 100 cards, but each player was only dealt 7, all of which had 3 possible variations. Tal hoped that he would be lucky. Another guard dealt the cards 1 at a time, as was the usual practice. Tal took his first card and felt the warmth. Beastmaker cards were somehow made with pinhead-sized sunstones bonded to heavy pasteboard. The sunstones made them warm, and also created very lifelike pictures of the beasts on the cards. Nearly all the cards showed creatures from Einir, plus a few other beasts that didn't seem to exist either in Einir or the castle. Tal's first card was a phalarope, a marine animal that floated around in the water and had thousands of poisonous tendrils. Its only real use was in the special category, because then the made beast would have poisonous tendrils. Tal knew that this card would change to a Kurshkin if he applied green light from his sunstone. Kurshkin were small, but very smart and quick lizards, so would be good in either speed or head. Unfortunately, Tal didn't know what the third variation of the card was. He had a faint memory that it might turn into a hug thing under red light, but couldn't be sure. Hug things were particularly nasty. They looked like a carpet of comfortable green moss, but could spring up and wrap themselves around you in an instant. For the game, a hug thing card would be good in skin or strength. "I will play first, if you like," said Ethar. This would give Tal a slight advantage, so he quickly nodded to say yes. "Heart of a Borzog," announced Ethar, laying the card down on the second rectangle in front of her. Tal looked at the card, which showed a fearsome, semi-human, and very hairy creature, roughly the size of 3 people across the shoulders. This was a good initial play. Borzogs would fight to the death, and beyond. Once they got a grip, they never let go, even when they were killed. Strong-hearted indeed. Head of a... whatever this is," announced Tal, playing the phalarope into the head rectangle. He was going to change it into a Kurshkin later on, but he hoped Ethar would think he didn't know what he was doing. "A phalarope," said Ethar. She looked at the bulbous thing with its many tentacles and added, "It does look something like a giant brain." "That's what I thought," said Tal, pretending he was relieved. "A giant brain. Perfect for the head." The other guard dealt them both another card. Tal picked his up slowly. At first all he could see was a pair of red eyes in the card. Then he slowly became aware of an outline around them. The card was showing him something hidden in a cave or a hole, with only the eyes visible. Then Tal remembered, and barely suppressed a shiver of horror. This card was a cavern mouth. They were horrible creatures in Einir, who dug holes for themselves in the side of a mountain, and then backed in and opened their enormous jaws. What he thought were glowing eyes were actually something like tonsils at the back of the thing's throat. Whenever anything came close enough, the cavern mouth's extendable jaws would snap out, grab its prey, and drag it inside to be slowly digested. In the game of Beastmaker, the cavern mouth card was unusual. It could be played in speed, because its jaws were incredibly fast at snapping out, or it could be played in special, to give the created beast extendable jaws. The variations were not so useful, or at least not as far as Tal knew. Orange light would turn the card into a Jorbit, which was a fairly fast, dim-witted nocturnal grass-eater. Violet light would change it to a Rorek, one of the strange stone creatures of Einir. This would seem useful in skin, but actually the Rorek was very brittle stone, and could be broken into little pieces by a single sharp blow. Tal didn't want the beast he made to shatter at the first hit, and he wasn't sure where else the Rorek could be played. "Speed of a Gorblog," said Ethar, playing a card that looked like a large, glowing blue toad that was too fat to do anything. But one of the variations of the Glorblog card was the incredibly zappy Fleamite, an insect that could move faster than a human eye could track it. Tal knew Ethar would change that card later on. "Speed of a Cavern Mouth," Tal countered, playing his card. He wouldn't be changing that. Even if Ethar did change her speed card to the Fleamite, it wouldn't be much faster than a Cavern Mouth. "You have played before," remarked Ethar. "Few people remember the Cavern Mouth can be played for speed." "I saw my great-uncle use it that way once," Tal said, still trying to give the impression he was an absolute beginner at Beastmaker. The game moved more swiftly then. Within a few minutes, both Tal and Ethar had 6 of their 7 rectangles filled with cards. If they filled the 7th, their beast would be made, without a chance to change any of the existing cards. Ethar had left her strength rectangle empty, and Tal the temper. As Tal had expected, Ethar started to change her cards instead of playing her 7th. With each change, Tal became more concerned. He was changing his too, but he wasn't sure he was going to end up with a better beast. "You hid your skill well," said Ethar, as she changed the mild-mannered Clotho work beast in her temper rectangle to the insanely vicious Vengnarl, a creature that attacked even its own kind if they trespassed over its scent-marked boundaries. Tal nodded, but he wasn't paying attention to what Ethar said. Everything depended on him getting the best beast. Now that Ethar had changed the temper of her beast, Tal thought he knew what to play there. But once he put that card down, his beast would be complete. Did he need to make any changes? Quickly he scanned the 7 rectangles. Head of a Kershkin, skin of a Samhael semi-dragon, temper, that was to come. Heart of a Hrugan, which was a gamble, since that was actually a kind of weed that never gave up. It grew everywhere in Einir, and seemingly could not be eradicated. Speed of a Cavern Mouth, strength of a Jargul, a cannibalistic strangling snake of the jungles of Einir that primarily ate others of its own kind after weeks-long battles to crush one another to death. Special, the ability of the gossamer bug to fly. Tal ran over all the variations in his head, while Ethar arched her fingers into a steeple and waited for his move. "To see the Empress or lose your sunstone," she said. "What is it to be?" "Temper of an Ice Fang," said Tal, playing his final card, locking all the others in. This was his greatest gamble. He didn't know enough about this card or its properties. But he remembered Great-Uncle Ebbet saying that the Ice Fangs of Einir were among the most dangerous of creatures in the spirit world. They never got angry, or demoralized, or had any emotions at all, it seemed. They just coldly fought to the very best of their ability, never distracted by danger, wounds, or anything else. "And strength of a Jargul," said Ethar, playing exactly the same card as Tal. "Let the battle begin."